Welcome to the Author's Hour. My name is Fred Zarm, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We're a volunteer organization that aims to support and supplement the activities of the institution's Writers Center. And by so doing, we hope to encourage writers and promote writing on the institution grounds and beyond. Now, we sponsor a number of events. I'm going to publicize a few of them now and a few of them later. First of all, every week at 5 o'clock on Zoom, we have an open mic session. And as you know by now, every Thursday at 12:15, we have the Author's Hour series on Zoom, but as I mentioned, it'll also be available on YouTube. On YouTube now is an activity, a special event that just occurred yesterday, the annual Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project. We had, I think, about 8 or 9 readers reading their favorite poems and briefly explaining why they like them so much. Some good poems, some good readers. Actually, all the poems were good and all the readers were good. If you're a writer, you should know that the Literary Arts Contest, the annual Literary Arts Contest, is closing on Sunday, the 25th. Anyone who has registered for a class or gotten a gate pass or attended the Writers Festival, either off season for the classes, the courses that were offered then, or the ones that are being offered now, or if you've been involved, then you are eligible. I'm going to put in chat, I'm going to put our webpage where you can find out more information about all these different events and activities. Now, I want to introduce our first reader, and the readings are what we're here about. Safe behind her laptop on the shores of Chautauqua Lake, Deborah Madar dares to delve into the more mysterious facets of the human psyche through her fiction. In both her 2014 debut, Convergence, her second book, Dark Riddle, and her third novel, A Deeper Dive, which she is currently editing for submission, she invites her readers to delve into an exploration of what ifs. Madar's fiction is rich material for book club discussions, as the answers to the questions she poses often have more than 2 sides. Deborah is a native Western New Yorker. For many years before her first novel was published, she was a high school and college English teacher. She and her husband, Gary, reside in Bemis Point. They have 4 children and 6 grandchildren. So you're ahead of me on that by 2. Okay. Take it away, Deb.
All right, well, I'm going to be reading today from my second novel, Dark Riddle. I was shocked by Adam Lanza's father's interview in the New Yorker, the only interview his father ever gave in 2014. And it made me think about what it would be like to be a parent, an unsuspecting parent who has to face the true nature of a child and the shame and the guilt that brings. And so my protagonist in Dark Riddle is Gina Clayton, who is the mother of such a child. And the first chapter introduces Gina Clayton, and it's Novena San Judas. When Gina Clayton was 4 years old, she and her mother would board a metro bus once a month to go to the funny farm. That's what her father had called the place. but those Saturday morning visits had been disappointingly unfunny to the little girl. The one clear memory from those trips to the Buffalo State Hospital was of trailing close behind her great aunt Conchetta up and down a long hallway, while the old lady, holding a beautiful blue rosary in her wrinkled hands, muttered to herself in Italian. "What's she saying, Mommy?" Gina had asked in a whisper. "She's praying. She's making a novena to St. Jude. She's asking him for his help," her mother had said. His help? Why does she need help? Her mother listened intently to the old woman's murmuring before she answered, "For us, for you and me. She's asking St. Jude to protect us." Decades later, on a stormy November morning, Gina repeated that same prayer she heard all those years ago in the halls of the mental institution. Just moments before, she was sound asleep, but a blast of shrieking static jolted her head off the pillow. She turned and squinted in the direction of the sound, listening for several seconds before she could discern its source. The police scanner in the twins' bedroom across the hall, a relic of her former life with her felon of a husband, had rarely been turned on since his arrest. One of the boys must have been listening to it while she had been at work. She sat up and strained to make out the dispatcher's hiccuping transmission. Lake Heenan School, shooter, all responders. Before she realized it, Gina was praying. "St. Jude, protect Luke, John, Tom, and Lisa." Frantically pulling on her jeans, she begged the saint to safeguard her 4 children who were at the school. She collapsed to the floor and tugged on her boots. The phone in the upstairs hallway was ringing, but she ignored it. Instead, she worked at tightening the rawhide laces, fighting her crazily trembling hands. The answering machine blared as she stumbled out of her bedroom and into the hallway. "This is the emergency notification system from the Lake Heenan School District. We are in lockdown due to a crisis situation. Parents and family members are not to go to the school. The authorities will decide when it is safe to end the lockdown. When we are advised to do so, we will transport our students to the Langston Fire Hall on Oak Street. Households will be informed when this happens." Again, she recognized the robotic voice. It was Wendy, the school secretary, the first person she had met when she had registered the kids. As Gina flew down the stairs, she heard the woman's mechanical tone repeating the words that would change everything. "This is the emergency notification system from the Lake Heenan School. St. Jude, protect Luke, John, Tom, and Lisa." She knew as she prayed that she would not follow Wendy's dictum. She would go to the school. She had to see her children to make sure that they were safe. Where had she put her purse? She looked for it on the entryway bench where she thought she remembered dropping it, but it wasn't there. She couldn't recall going into the kitchen when she got home from work earlier this morning, but she'd been so tired, maybe she had. Then she saw it on the table and grabbed it, intent on retrieving her car keys. She fished for them in every compartment of the bag. "God damn it," she said, clenching her fists in an attempt to halt the bizarre shaking. With a clatter that echoed throughout the empty house, she dumped the contents of her purse onto the table. Her keys were not there. Did Luke leave them in the car this morning after their driving lesson? She tripped over a kitchen chair as she bolted back to the foyer. Grabbing her red parka from the hook, she opened the front door to the sound of wailing sirens. At first, a duet, and then a trio. The alarms beckoned all emergency volunteers from everywhere along the 20-mile shoreline. "St. Jude, protect Luke, John, Tom, and Lisa." A mini blizzard had been well underway as she slept. Gina fought the wind as it snatched the knob from her hand. She grabbed at it and managed to slam the door closed. Blowing snow blinded her as she pulled on her parka and fled down the porch steps. Halting as she reached the bottom stair, she put her hand over her eyes, attempting to shelter them from the blustering flakes as she made her way to the car. But there was nothing to see. The Pontiac was gone. In its place was a foot of snow. As she stood in the white drifts, staring at her carless driveway, Gina frantically continued to mumble her novena to the patron saint of lost causes. St. Jude, protect Luke, John, Tom, and Lisa. She was reenacting the old lady's slow march down the halls of Buffalo State Hospital, pacing up and down the length of the driveway from the street to the small shed in the backyard, desperate to put her thoughts into some kind of order. She had to get to the school. She closed her eyes and fought the panic that threatened to engulf her. Opening them, she glanced up and down her street. Which neighbor's door should she pound on to beg for a ride? It would have to be Mr. Simpson's, although the old man had never been neighborly in any sense of the word. With her head down in order to brace herself against the strong gusts of wind and still praying out loud, she turned toward the old man's house. St. Jude, protect. When she heard tires crunching snow behind her, she turned and saw the flashing lights. The state trooper got out of his car and walked toward her. Gina's knees buckled. Mrs. Clayton, he asked, is Luke Clayton your son? Gina, kneeling in the snow, nodded, closed her eyes, and continued to pray. So that is my introductory chapter that introduces Gina Clayton and the horrible situation in her life. And what happens is that she goes on a journey to find out what happened to this boy that was her good son, how he managed to become the perpetrator of an atrocity. I'm going to read from chapter 9 now, which is the second chapter that introduces, I guess I will call him her sidekick. Adam Stoller is a writer, and a successful writer in New York, who becomes involved in Gina's journey to figure out what's happened. And now if I can get to chapter 9 without too much trouble, I'll be so happy. There it is, okay. And this chapter is breaking news. Adam has just hosted, by the way, Thanksgiving dinner in his apartment with his 3 tenants who are also friends of his. And it's that evening, Thanksgiving evening. Adam poured coffee for the 4 of them in the kitchen while Diane presided over cutting the pie at the table. Bring the cream, will you please, Adam? Diane called from the other room. His phone vibrated against the granite countertop. After his parents' morning call from their prison, as his father referred to the expensive assisted living facility they had moved to recently, Adam had muted it and left it in the kitchen the rest of the day. He glanced at it on his way to the refrigerator, and his agent's face stared back at him. What could Jesse possibly want from him on a holiday? In spite of the 4 missed call icons on the home screen, he decided it couldn't be that important. He placed the cups of coffee and the cream on a tray and walked back to join his friends. An hour later, Diane said her goodnight. She had a deadline to meet and she would have to get up early the next morning. Raj went back to the study to watch the last game of the evening while Adam and Tess loaded the dishwasher and washed pots and pans. His phone shuddered again. Jesus, it's almost 9 o'clock. What does he want? Adam said, picking up the phone and looking at the picture of Jess Olson on his screen. Sorry, Tess, I better take this. Adam walked to his bedroom and hit the return call button. A half a ring later, his agent picked up. Happy Thanksgiving, Jess, he said. Jess Olson was perhaps the most sought-after literary agent in the business. The urgency in his voice shocked Adam. Jesus, thank God I've been trying to reach you all day. I was just about to leave my in-laws' place in White Plains and drive over there. Have you seen the news? I don't know what you're talking about. He could hear Raj speaking to Tess in the kitchen now, a clear exigency in his friend's tone. That school shooting in upstate Monday, Jesse began. What about it? The kid who did it was apparently a fan of yours. They found a copy of Seneca Optical in his pocket. What? Jess spoke rapidly, as if he had rehearsed the words. The FBI says that so far they found nothing in the way of a manifesto or a suicide note, nothing on Facebook or Twitter. The only thing they have in writing is your story, ripped out of a copy of Easy Listening they found in his bedroom. Adam's mind raced. Seneca Optical was something he had written several years before his short story collection was published. It originated as an exercise assigned by George Saunders in his short story writing seminar. The challenge had been to contemporize a myth from an early culture. Adam had recently visited Ganondagan, the site of a Native American community near Rochester that had flourished throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. He had toured the Bark Longhouse and hiked some of the trails. In the gift shop of the museum, he had purchased a booklet on the Iroquois, and the story of the thunder gods had intrigued him. Adam, Jesse said, are you still there? Yeah, he said as Tess and Raj tentatively walked into the room. So don't talk to the press. Let Marie and I take care of damage control. Marie Lamphere was Adam's publicist. As soon as HBO had purchased Notorious, she had been diligent in getting his face and story out to any media outlet that would take it. Thanks to her, he was a minor celebrity, at least in New York. Adam, did you hear me? Jesse pressed him. Yes, I just can't understand how that story, how many did he kill? He asked. 8, counting himself. 1 kid is still in critical condition, his agent answered. Christ, he said. Tess and Raj stood watching him. He could tell from their shocked expressions that they had heard the news too. I've got to go, Jess. Okay, buddy, I'll call you tomorrow morning. Try to get some sleep. Listen, this could be a good thing for us. People are going to want to read that story. Easy Listening sales are going to spike. How's the new book? Adam hit end call and set his phone down. And I think I'll stop there, Fred.
Wow. 2 dynamite chapters that
Thank you.
make me want to find out more.
It's in the bookstore at Chautauqua Institution right now and other places.
Very good.
Thanks.
I can briefly, let's see if I can get this to share. How full is that? Is that, do I need to scroll down for that to be visible?
I think so. And from my viewpoint, yes. And then there, that's
there it
interesting. That's pretty large. I think all the data about where it's available is below that.
Yeah,
So
go down more.
there it is.
With a nice review from Kirkus.
Yes, it was nice.
Tract, and Amazon as an ebook as well. Great.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, just a few more announcements about the Friends of the Chautauqua Writer Center and about literary events in general at Chautauqua, which this year are virtual as well as in person. So even if you're nowhere near Chautauqua, you can take part in these. This morning, Eddie Glaude Jr. spoke mostly about his new book, James Baldwin's America. Well, actually, it's Begin Again, James Baldwin's America. And he will be interviewed about that book at 4 o'clock on the Chautauqua Assembly platform. Coupled with that, he will also, well, the second part will be about the other CLSC book of the week, Shakespeare in a Divided America. And appropriately, the artistic director of the Chautauqua Theater Company, Andrew Borba, who's an experienced director and actor, of Shakespeare will be speaking about that book. Tomorrow at 12:15 on the virtual porch, which is porch.chq.org, the prose writer of the week, Oliver de la Paz, will be speaking. And I'm taking a course from him in about 35 minutes. He's great. So I think you enjoy his talk. I also want to publicize sort of our sister art theater. The Chautauqua Theater Company is presenting a commedia, the old Italian form of improvised comedy, 4 o'clock in what's called the Performance Pavilion. And I think those are the announcements for right now. Let me move on to our second reader, a very familiar face to those of you who have attended Chautauqua and Writers Center events. Clara Silverstein is the author of the historical novel Secrets in a House Divided, the memoir White Girl, A Story of School Desegregation, and 3 cookbooks, as well as an upcoming, I would say, nonfiction about an amusement park in the area. And I'll let her tackle the title of that because I was mangling it a while ago. Her work has appeared in American Heritage, Southern Cultures, Blackbird, the Boston Globe, and at Boston City Hall. She's the former program director of the Chautauqua Writers Center and has participated in Chautauqua every summer since 1985. Raised in Richmond, Virginia, Clara and her husband live in the Boston area. Clara, take it away.
All right, thank you, Fred. Thank you for all that you do to support the literary arts at Chautauqua. The title of the new book is Norumbega Park and the Totem Pole Ballroom. It's an Images of America book, and it's telling the story of an amusement park in the Boston area that ran from 1897 into the early 1960s. But today I'm going to be reading from Chautauqua. This is the literary journal from the institution, and it's available widely on the grounds. I'm quite sure it's at the bookstore and probably elsewhere. Every year, the journal publishes an issue with a theme, and this year's theme is water. The piece I'll be reading is called Crossing the Bridge. It's a difficult subject. It's my sister's suicide. But you'll see in the piece that it really, I will be explaining how the water and looking at the water is helping me process this overwhelming grief. Crossing the bridge. I pedal around a curve on the bike path and glimpse the Golden Gate Bridge. Fog shrouds the top of both girders and most of the wires, but the span makes a clear, unwavering line. I stop beneath, breath caught in my throat, and step off the bike. This is my first look at the bridge since my sister Janet jumped off it 3 weeks before. She had just turned 59. Scrubby Scotch broom bunches on either side of the trail. A cold wind sweeps across my face. I want to turn around and flee from the view, from the Sunday bikers on the trail, and from San Francisco itself. I want it to be September again, the month before the urn of ashes wrapped in a velvet pouch was delivered to my front porch in Boston. My husband and our 23-year-old daughter stopped their bikes behind me. Even though I ride more slowly, today they let me take the lead. I'm wearing Janet's leopard print leggings. Janet loved animal prints and bold patterns, perhaps as a foil to her shyness and social awkwardness. The leggings smell like her coconut lotion, and I feel her presence around me, something she would appreciate because she liked the spirit world so much she took mediumship workshops. In the townhouse where we grew up in Chicago, Janet's bedroom was painted pink and mine painted yellow. In my earliest memories, she and I made castles in our sandbox and ran under the sprinkler in our yard. On winter days, we arranged plastic tiles on pegboards to make elaborate designs, or braved cheek-numbing temperatures to go ice skating with our parents. Our father hung swings from the rafters in the basement, and if we went high enough and timed it just right, we could gleefully touch each other's feet. It was just the two of us, no other siblings. Sometimes she called me a pest and a tag-along. It was true. She was my big sister, and I wanted to follow her everywhere. As we continue biking, the sun burns off the fog, and the bay stretches before us, undulating like a silk curtain. The outlines of the bridge sharpen. The next time we stop, we pick wild roses, vetch, and Indian clover near the trail, the flowers for our makeshift funeral. This selection will be fine with Janet, as she never liked formalities. Traffic noise drowns out any attempt at conversation when we finally reach the bridge. The entire structure vibrates. Black and green signs direct cyclists to the left, pedestrians to the right. Caution, gusty winds, another sign warns. White letters against a blue background announce crisis counseling. Free support 24/7. There is hope, the words declare, with a yellow call box underneath. Janet kept walking past the box. The summer after our father died suddenly of a heart attack, I was 7 and Janet was 10. We moved with our mother from Chicago to Richmond, Virginia, her hometown. Janet and I spent every afternoon in a neighbor's pool. We made up new kinds of jumps to supplement our standard cannonballs and jackknives. In our bathing suits, we noticed that each of us had a similar birthmark, a splotch of skin that never tanned. Hers was on her stomach, mine on my upper arm. The tanner we became, the more prominent these blotches became, our indelible mark as sisters. In most other ways, we barely looked alike. I am blonde and not much taller than 5 feet. She was 6 inches taller, her face longer, her hair reddish brown. In Richmond, our age difference meant we didn't overlap at the same schools. We also went off in separate directions. The unspoken fault line between us was our father's death. Nobody recovered from that. Not my mother, who held a teaching job and ran the household, but could no longer express any joy. Not Janet, who withdrew. Not I, who did everything possible to avoid spending a lot of time at home. Instead of grieving together, we retreated from each other and seldom spoke of our father because it might make us cry, and that was something we did privately, if at all. Once in a while, when Janet was in high school, she invited me into her room late at night. While she lay in bed, I sat on the rug under her Woodstock poster. Her good grades would be her ticket out of Richmond, she said, and she encouraged me to keep doing well in school. At age 17, she left for college. After that, we never lived in the same house or in the same place again. It's 220 feet from the bridge to the water of the Golden Gate Strait, which connects the Pacific Ocean and the San Francisco Bay. Wind and waves make it treacherous. Swimmers each year sign up for a race to cross 3 kilometers from the bridge's south tower to Finger Point Rock in Marin County. They wear wetsuits and bright bathing caps. Patrol boats float nearby to pick up anyone who panics or becomes too tired to finish. Those swimmers are out to accomplish a daring physical feat. Janet had little chance of survival once she hit the water. Her velocity of approximately 75 miles per hour would make the strait feel more like concrete than liquid. The Marin County Sheriff's Office picked up her body by boat and ran the fingerprint that identified her. I received a phone call from an officer a few minutes after that, around 7 p.m. East Coast time. The first suicide from the bridge took place in 1937, just 3 months after the bridge opened. People have jumped ever since, on average 30 per year. Each one of the approximately 1,500 people who have committed suicide this way has a different reason. All leave survivors trying to reckon with the shock. I'm one who is doomed to reimagine the plunge from railing to water in an endless, horrifying loop, wondering if I could have done something to prevent it. As we start down the path for cyclists on the bridge, I continue to lead my family. The sheer height and enormity of the bridge and what she did, making my legs feel like weights. But I keep pedaling. This is the place I've chosen to say goodbye to her, and I'm not turning back now. Janet moved to San Francisco right after she finished college. In the ochre light and eucalyptus scented air, she forged her own path among people who tolerated her quirkiness. She never married, never had children. While supporting herself with minimum wage jobs, she became adept at reading tarot cards and interpreting astrology. She had lived for many years with a boyfriend in the Castro, a neighborhood with crosswalks painted in gay pride rainbows. 2 months before she died, he had informed her of his plans to leave her for someone else. About 2 weeks before she died, she told me she had diverticulitis and would start antibiotics. I encouraged her to go to the emergency room because she was in tremendous pain, but she never did. If only I had flown out there. How little I understood the depth of her despondence, a far greater problem than her treatable illness. In one of our last telephone conversations, she said she had done a tarot reading for me and predicted a time of intense turmoil. I wonder if she predicted anything for herself. The only hint I received of her plans was the call she made to wish me a happy birthday. Next year's the big one, I said of her, looking ahead to when she would turn 60. Ha, she said, if I make it that long. A week later, she jumped. Janet left no suicide note, though a month before she died, she penned this poem fragment in the notebook I found in her apartment. The journey of life's been a lonely one for me, full of missed opportunities and betrayal, so far as I can see. I break in the middle of the bridge. My family gathers around me and I lean against my husband. Looking down at the swirl of water, I feel dizzy. How brave and desperate Janet must have felt when she hoisted her leg over the waist-high rail. In her apartment, I found the purse she left behind the day she went to the bridge. Inside were her driver's license, credit card, cell phone, and even her eyeglasses, suggesting she no longer had use for these basic possessions. Since she had no car, I imagined that she caught a bus to the Golden Gate and paid the fare with cash she pulled from her pocket. We toss our flowers over the railing and watch the current carry them away. You thought nobody loved you, I said, my sunglasses fogged with tears. At the Golden Gate Bridge Welcome Center, I wait in a long line for the bathroom. On the wall, an exhibit describes the bridge's design as Art Deco on a grand scale, showing details of chevrons on the struts and pylons. The fog, steel, salt, rust, and paint panel explains how climate forces corrode the metal on the bridge. Maintenance workers fight back with zinc primer and international orange paint. Behind me, a group of tourists speaking different languages must be planning their day's adventures. I feel mute, wrung out, amazed that my skeleton still holds me together. A few days later, as the plane to Boston lifts off the runway, fog shrouds the bridge so that only the uppermost points are visible. The tops of San Francisco's buildings look like they float in the clouds. When Janet and I were little, we made up a story about Cloudasia, a nation built on the one solid cloud in the sky. The inhabitants walked around in robes that looked like bed sheets and spoke a language called Cloudasian. We've believed they floated all day in their own secret civilization, far removed from life on Earth. As the plane rises, the city disappears, turning the view below into Cloudasia. From this height, our childhood also seems like an illusion. Yet I know that we started out together and that Janet went on to walk San Francisco's steep streets for 40 years. I carry her jewelry and her books with me, my grief below, in rivers emptying into delta, bay rushing into ocean, fresh into salt, wave after wave. Thank you.
I'm speechless. Thank you so much, Clara, for sharing that amazing combination of courage and craft. Thank you. I will open it up. We are getting some comments on chat, but if you have any comments or questions for either author, you can either just speak up, unmute yourself and speak up, or wave your hand. I think our two co-hosts can see you. It's hard for me to do that because I'm recording this.
I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
Deb, your book was, the story you told was scary, and the contradiction was so apparent that on one hand, there's this story of violence, and on the other hand, it turns into an opportunity to promote a book. And that is so true, and at the same time, it's so disturbing. And you bring out that contradiction very well. I also have a comment for Clara. The suicide came so suddenly that it had just the desired shock impact that I'm sure as a writer you intended for it to have. You're talking about the strolling and the bridge and all the signs and going flashbacks to the childhood, and then boom, all of a sudden, it just hits you. And how you take the reader back into the protagonist imagining how the suicide actually happened step by step, or how it could have happened, was so sad. so sad. And I love Cloud-Asia and the imagination. So you braided it so beautifully with the present and the past and some imagination of the children of another world with different beings. Very, very
Thank you.
descriptive.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I love the details. I mean, every flashback added to the story. I mean, I felt like you just handpicked the perfect things to elucidate the event. The ending on Cloud-Asia. It feels like just the right amount of stuff to give the perspective of what happened, and linking them so seamlessly. The clouds over the bridge, the Cloud-Asia, it just really is gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah. Who knew when we imagined that world, how it would come back?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, she was right. She said there would be some turmoil ahead, right?
Oh, yeah. 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 So, those of you who go to Chautauqua might be familiar with Lilydale, which is a community of spiritualists nearby. And I never went there with Janet, but she really liked that place. She would tell me, oh, go to this medium or that medium. So, she definitely, I think, believed she was going to a better place. So that's comforting to think about.
I have one more question. How was the process of writing? How did that ease, if it did, your grief? How was the grieving process through the writing? Or just briefly, how did that work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think a lot of writers deal with different kinds of grief in their writing. And at first, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and read everything I could about suicide, and also read what other writers had written. There's an amazing poem by Maxine Kumin about Anne Sexton, who committed suicide, and it's talking about putting on Anne Sexton's coat and thinking about her. That really helped me. Just, what's it like to be the survivor? And the way Maxine Kumin wrote that was amazing. So that, I would say, would be my first response, was to read and then start the writing process. And it took a really long time to get this down, because there's so much. I just wasn't sure how to pare it down. But I think paring it down is important when there's this overwhelming sprawl of feelings.
Yeah.
I think once I realized I could talk about the makeshift funeral and then have the flashbacks, that helped me give the structure. Yeah.
Was it cathartic?
Yes, it was. And now I don't feel like writing anymore about it, which is probably
Closure.
the sign of catharsis and closure in a certain way. Yeah. No writer ever says never, but right now I feel like I've said what I wanted to say.
I have one more follow-up question, Clara, if I may. I know you write poetry too. I know you wrote some poems about it. Did you find that the short story was a better format for your grief?
Yes, I think the poems were helpful in terms of getting me to think about certain things and certain parts of the experience. But I think to do the essay form was more complete.
Okay.
But the poetry was definitely a helpful part of the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm just scanning, see if anything's shown up in chat. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Let's give Deb and Clara another round of applause. You can even unmute if you want to. And
thank you all for attending. It was especially touching to see family members, including my daughter and my cousin and friends here. So
That's
Thank
good.
you. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, yeah.
I want
Well, it's
to,
very interesting, so I enjoyed it.
yeah. I invite you to look at chat. I did post links for different friends of the event, excuse me, of the friends of the Writers Center and of Chautauqua in general. Although I know we very often show up at Authors Hour because we know the authors, I do invite you to attend even if you don't know the authors. Next week, for instance, we have two very gifted poets. One, George Bilger, has taught and will be teaching again week 6 at Chautauqua. He's a poet who teaches at John Carroll University in Cleveland. His latest book is Blood Pages. And Julie Phillips Brown, who I've encountered in lots of workshops at Chautauqua, a professor at VMI. I'm laughing because she's sort of a Renaissance woman. She's a painter. She makes books. She's a jewelry maker, and she speaks Swedish. So, so she'll be reading from her forthcoming book, The Adjacent Possible. So I hope to see you at some of these events. Do consider joining the friends. Joining gives you the benefit of saving $5 if you want to buy that copy of Chautauqua that Clara's moving essay is in, right? So we're doing the Vanna White here. We're showing that. Okay. Also, if you're going to enter the writing contest, if you're a member, you don't pay the $5 reading fee. Anyway, thank you for attending. As I said, I hope to see you at some other events. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Fred.
you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Fred,
Fred.
for holding this
You're welcome.
and introducing us to so many authors we